Hello, girls. Hello, boys. Welcome to Hacking Self-Storage. It's another Thursday, and that can only mean one thing. We have another fantastic guest. Today, we are speaking to none other than Jerry Alexander. Jerry is the host of the Commercial Property Investor podcast, and I've been on his podcast not so long ago, and I had such a good time on that podcast. I decided to invite him back today to my podcast. And Jerry has just recently purchased a self-storage facility, container yard, with about 50 containers on. And so what we do in this interview right now, we talk all about property investments, we talk about commercial real estate investments, and then we get onto self-storage and why he opted to go into self-storage. And it wasn't what I was expecting. It was just an opportunity that came up. It was fantastic. But do you know what? I know that you guys are going to learn so much from this episode. Jerry is a fantastic guy. And if anybody wants to check out the podcast, the links are in the show notes as well, because what Jerry did was he did a mini series on self-storage, all you need to know if you are a self-storage operator. And the guys from Willbox were also interviewed on that podcast as well in that mini series. And I highly recommend it if anybody is already in the industry or they're looking to maybe get in the industry, then yeah, it's certainly one to check out. Check out the links in the show notes for that. Anyway, without any further ado, here is Jerry. Thank you once again, Jerry, for your time. Welcome to Hacking Self-Storage. So I've got a great guest for you guys today, Jerry Alexander. Jerry, thank you so much for coming on, buddy.
Thanks, Dean. I'm really looking forward to it.
So if you can tell the listeners a bit about you and what you do.
All right, Dean. So my main business is commercial property. I invest in knackered old buildings, redevelop them, split them up generally into lots of units and rent them out to small businesses. So my main business is actually buying old buildings and doing them up. But my day-to-day thing is actually operating those spaces for lots and lots of small businesses.
Excellent. And I know you've also got a podcast as well, the Commercial Property Investor podcast.
That's
How
correct.
long ago did you set that up and why did you? I mean, obviously I love podcasting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I've been listening to podcasts for a while and I definitely wanted to do something in that space, but I just found it difficult to get myself started. Eventually I did, though, about a year ago. I think it was March last year was when I started. So 11 months. So we're about 54 episodes in, nothing quite like your volume. But enjoying it, doing lots of interviews and sharing information on commercial property.
And did you actually find it harder to set up than you thought, or was it easier to set up than you thought? Because I was exactly the same boat as you.
Yeah, it's easy, isn't it, really? It's not that difficult to get set up. I mean, there's lots of barriers like, what about the tech? How am I going to get these podcasts professionally done so they sound actually pretty good? But actually, you don't really need that much. You need a bit of help, yeah? I need a bit of kit, but it's not. The biggest block is the person sitting in your seat.
Yeah, 100% agree. Do you know, I took a course, Pat Flynn's course, Power Up Podcasting, and halfway through the course, I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to press record. I'm just going to do it. And I promise you, Jerry, my hands were sweaty. I couldn't get my words out. And in the end, you just realize, you know what? Just press record, hit it, do it, and whatever happens, happens. Yeah. So, Jerry, I know that obviously you've now dipped your toe into self-storage, but let's first of all just start talking about property. How did you get into property yourself?
Okay, so as far as I can remember, I always wanted to do stuff with property, and I bought my first kind of development back in 2000 it was, and we developed a house which we managed to just get out of without losing any money. Always and good. Then I started doing the buying in resi, doing them up and renting them out. So buy to lets basically, and I did that for 3 or 4 years, but I was trying to find something a bit bigger, a bigger deal, and I didn't quite know what that was going to be. I started talking to one of our local agents about commercial property. He told me not to bother, which was really encouraging. But I did eventually find a deal off market, which was a multi-let building not too far from where I lived. And I ended up taking on this building, and over a period of maybe 3 or 4 years, we did it up, increased the service level, increased the rent. And then I had it revalued because we're looking at another building, and I realized that the value had loads to do with the rental income. And I'd actually really increased the value of this building. And I didn't realize that at the time, that's what I was doing. And it allowed me to borrow for the next one. And we've actually really niched now in that market of small units, whether it's storage, office space, venue space, meeting rooms, and co-working, all for new start businesses and small businesses.
Right, excellent. So what are the barriers to entry then to get into the commercial? Is it the funding then?
I think that depends on your approach. So initially, my thoughts about commercial was you made your money in resi, and then or somewhere else. Then you went and parked your money in commercial. You bought stuff to get a yield or an income. That's what I thought you did. But I realized that actually you can be really active in commercial and increase the value of properties quite considerably by trying different strategies. And I didn't realize it to start with. I also at the time had this preconceived idea that yes, you needed money to get into commercial.
That's what
So
I
what
thought.
I did was I traded some resi, sold that, got some money, and then went and bought a commercial because that's what you do. But then I realized that actually there are other ways of raising finance. And you don't necessarily need to have either a residential background to get started. You can go straight into commercial, but also you don't necessarily need lots of money because you can use other people's money. But at the time, that was not anywhere near a concept I understood, but it's definitely possible without money. So one of the biggest barriers, I think, really, again, is that thing that it's the person sitting in your seat, and
Yeah.
it's that lack of knowledge, because the commercial property market is really good at making itself very, there's a lack of transparency. So you look at it and you just, what is the shape of this thing? It's like you're blindfolded in a darkened room. You just can't quite work out how this market works. But as resi, we generally all have lived in a house. We kind of understand it, and it just seems a bit more natural. But commercial market's very good at making itself a bit opaque. But
Yeah.
actually, it's not that complicated.
Yeah, I love that because, like you said, that so often the person holding you back, the barrier to entry is the person sitting in the seat,
Yes.
in your seat, and that is the same for every aspect of life. One of my actual best friends, he had an accident at work a few years back, and it meant that he couldn't work in the industry anymore, which was really upsetting for him because that's what he's trained to do for most of his life. He got a mid to high six-figure settlement, and what he's doing now is he's buying houses. Because he can't get a mortgage because even though he's got immaculate credit, he can't get another mortgage because he hasn't got any income coming in. And so what advice, if you had, say, £500,000, what advice to him, where would you start? How would you do it if you couldn't get a mortgage?
Well, the piece of advice I'd say to him is find a different broker.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the buy-to-let companies now, although they do want to know what your income is, they will take into consideration the income you're getting out of your property.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the same as buying a house for your own living, where they need to know all your income streams, so that you can cover the rent. They will take a cumulative rental figure into consideration. But anyway, £500,000, wow. I think because I'm in this market, right, I'm naturally going to err towards, I would be buying commercial right now, and I would be buying stuff that would be flexible, because one of the key things I think about this period that we're going into right now, because I went through 2010 and that last blip, and what I discovered was two things for my market. One, the types of buildings I was buying were becoming more accessible because there wasn't as much competition and prices were coming down. So the buildings themselves were becoming a bit cheaper. And equally, the inquiries for flexible space were going up because people didn't want to renew a lease because they didn't quite know what was going to happen in the market. So what they were doing is they were effectively saying, right, well, I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years' time, and I'm not quite sure we're going to be in 5 months' time. So I'm going to move into flexible space and move away from leasing right now, because then I'll have the ability to grow or shrink depending on what's going on in my market. So those two things actually made flexible space really, really interesting at that time. Our inquiries for a new building we took on in 2009 were really good, higher, probably higher than they have been since then. So
Right.
that's what I would be saying. I mean, I would be putting more money into that market.
Yeah, I'll tell you what he's doing, and then we'll get on to self-storage. So he's basically buying up cheaper houses, maybe around about £60,000, and he's doing them up himself, spending maybe a month's work on them, and he's actually getting 9.6% return on his money. So
Yep.
he's doing actually okay, but it's trial and error because he's never done it before, and he just thought, you know what, I'm going to try it, I'm going to give it a go and see what happens because I need some income for my family, you know. So. I'll definitely actually tell him to listen to your podcast as well because I feel like that you don't know what you don't know,
No.
and so I feel like that people need to educate themselves as much as possible. So it'd be absolutely perfect for that sort of thing for him. So on to storage, then, Jerry. How come you got into storage? What was the thing that attracted you to self storage?
So I'm sorry, there was no light bulb moment, Dean. I basically, that first building I bought had 6 containers in the back. So I've been in self-storage for 15 years. No, basically that building had 6 containers with it, right? And they were all let to clients in the building. So they were just commercial customers. And then when I bought that other building in 2009, I thought, I know what, I'll put some containers on this ground. So I ended up putting 30, 35 containers around this building on this land that we had and letting them out to customers that were in the building and also some external customers. So I think our split, we were talking about this the other day, I think our split is probably about 60-40 on commercial and domestic. It might be slightly higher on commercial actually, but it ended up being a really great strategy because we bought this building, the ground effectively came with it, right? So we didn't have to, so you can imagine the return on investment, right? All we're doing is buying containers. We had to get some security in and stuff, but the containers themselves, you pay the money for them. There's no ground rent because we owned the ground. I mean, it was great. But then recently we moved on to buying another facility because the guy who owned it approached me and I'd bought a building off him before and he said, look, I've got this self-storage um, project here. Do you know anybody who might want to buy it? No, I don't think I'm going to tell anyone. Anyway, so about a year later, 9 months later, we bought it off him, but we ended up buying the building with it because it didn't really totally make sense for our strategy just to buy the container storage business without the ground. So we bought the building, but that was another 50 containers.
Yep.
In a small, not unmanned place, but it's only like 600 yards from another building that we do have a person in, so they can manage it from there.
Yep.
So I didn't get into self-storage in some terrific way and thinking it was the most awesome thing, but I really do like it. I mean, we rent out offices for one person, we rent out offices for like 30 people and everything in between, and we have industrial bits and pieces and all sorts of stuff. But I have to say the bit that I really like the most is renting out a metal box because it's so uncomplicated.
It is.
And
So something you said at the early part of that, which I really want to dig into because I know that I can learn from you on this part of it as well. And I know other people will be like 60-40. How the heck? So you've got 60-40. So 60% of your customers are currently commercial. How did that happen? Is it just because of the people in the building have now started using containers? Or was there another strategy that we're not aware of?
no, it will be more down to the fact that the building itself had, or the buildings themselves had customers.
Yeah.
So in the first instance, the promotion of the spaces would have been to the new customers. And as we've discussed before, Dean, we didn't go out and say, all right, let's maximize this and bung 50 containers on here right away. We just added one or two, not one or two, twos, obviously, because it transports to 2, 4, 6, 8. And we were almost responding to the demand from customers that we already had. So when they moved out, we might get a spare container, and by then we're like, right, we better start advertising this. So we maybe promote it, and we would start getting domestic inquiries.
Yeah.
But even then, a lot of our customers are still, our external customers are still contractors and small businesses.
Yeah. And
So,
how many containers have you actually got now, then, Jerry? How many different sites have you got in total?
so it's just under 100 containers on predominantly 2 sites and then the original 6 on that small site.
Right, excellent. And you yourself did on your podcast, you did a mini series about self-storage,
Yeah.
and I've got to say it was absolutely terrific. So,
brilliant.
what prompted you to do that then on the commercial property podcast?
I'd spoken about it a couple of times before to people, and there was just a real interest in it. And I think it's a strategy that people can get their head around a bit more, and B, because of what I teach about commercial properties themselves, it really sits well, as I've just described, really, with having small customers. Because if you think about it, a lot of businesses that are working from home right now, especially the internet-based businesses that are wanting to grow, or they are growing, and they're like, right, I need space. Where am I going to go? A lot of them, the only logical place is an industrial unit, possibly a shop, but an industrial unit. And the problem is, when you take on a lease on that, it's actually quite expensive when you include all the costs. But from our point of view, they can rent an office for 2 people for a few £100s a month and a container. And now they've got their storage, their packing, their picking, and their internet and everything else all in one location. I mean, we do have a warehouse which we've subdivided, and that does have some storage in it as well. But the main storage really is the units outside, the containers. So I guess that's...
Yeah. I've got to say that looking back at my figures, like I do obviously on a Monday, I go through all my numbers and go through. It's really it's to share them, but I also like to keep myself accountable as well. So I was going through the figures this morning, and we had 1,500 square foot of move-ins last week, which is incredible. But we had 1,600 square foot of people moving out, which is incredibly bad. And that was my indoor self-storage site. On my indoor one, I've got 22 containers outside as well on the same site, because you might as well use that land there.
Yep.
And the average stay is so much higher for outdoor use. I look at Beverley, and Beverley, this it's not, we don't have, it's a mature site, it's nine years old. We don't have many move-ins, we don't have many move-outs, but we've only had one move-out this entire month, and we've had 500 square foot move-in. And just when you was talking then, and I was thinking, do you know what? Have I actually got a higher mix on my commercial to domestic at Beverley? And I do. I've only got 14% at Willoughby of commercial tenants or customers. And I wish I keep trying to find ways to get more. And I look at Beverley, and it's much, much higher. So moving forward then, Jerry, will you actually be looking for more self-storage facilities yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
And when you bought your last one then, was it just the fact that he came to you and said, are you interested? Or was you actively looking for a self-storage facility yourself?
No, I to be fair, I have been looking more for the standard format for me, which is a building and then some land with it. Because the thing is, if I can get a building that's big enough to pay for a member of staff, then I can manage any containers next door or on the bit of ground with it. So I have looked in the past about self-storage as a separate site, but I realized that, you need certain scale to make that work. And obviously there's a lot more costs associated with it rather than having the land as part of another deal.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, but yes, I am definitely looking. Yeah.
Yeah, a new facility that we're opening on Clough Road in Hull. It's going to be a 10,000 square foot building, or 10,800 square foot building, and it's £9 per square foot, Jerry, which is a heck of a lot around here. But it's a new build site, so I don't mind. He's putting a mezzanine flooring in for me. But the kicker for me is the fact that I've got the land around it. I can actually fence it off, and I can have between 40 to 45 containers in there.
Yeah.
Which to me is just free money, and
it's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, not necessarily free money, but it means that I'm making the most of my £9 per square foot that I'm looking at. And when I look at my figures and go through in detail how much I potentially can earn and my cash flow, it makes a whopping difference. It's just a cherry on top. And so moving forward, then I'll I'm not saying I'll never ever go to an indoor facility where I can't have containers, but it's just such an advantage to be able to have that bit of land, have that building, and have that land as well, because then I can maximize the return on investment I get.
100%. I want to go back to your thing about commercial customers for a second. You were asking
Yeah.
about how many and why. Um, Commercial customers do tend to stay with you longer,
Yes.
particularly if they're contractors. So I think naturally, if you think about it, if you've got a new site and you're predominantly getting domestic customers in, but you're getting some commercial, it just takes time, doesn't it, for those domestic to move out, and then occasionally you'll replace one with a commercial one. So when you've got a more mature site, you have those people that may be staying for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years because they're commercial customers. And naturally over time, hopefully what will happen is you will convert more to commercial customers. I just think when you're first getting started, you're just going to get bums on seats, aren't you?
Yeah. The best way I can explain it is because a lot of people ask me, well, why is the mature facility? Why is that? Why does it make any difference to the lifetime value of a customer and the longer the stay? And the way I look at it is when I first opened Beverly, I say, for example, for ease of numbers, I had 100 units and I might have rented out 50 units in that year. And 20% of those would stay for a long term. So say, let's say 10 customers of those stayed. So next year I only had 90 customers, 90 units to go out because I had 10 long staying customers.
Yep.
And then say another, in that year, another 10 stayed for long term. So therefore in year 3, I still have 100 storage containers. However, then I've only got 80 to go out. And the next year I might only have 70 to go out, and then 60 because I've got long-term customers in there. And so with Beverly now, because it's been open just over 8 years, we don't have a high turnover. We can accurately predict exactly how much we're going to take on a given month. It's not much fluctuation. That's why on Mondays, I only give details on Stormore, because Beverly, it's a little bit boring, Jerry. It's because it's predictable. There's not much happens. There's not much goes out. There's not much comes in.
That's the best, though.
That's the best. And so it's just getting to maturity. So going to your self-storage facility, then the one that you purchased, do you actually advertise then? Or if you do, where do you advertise? Is it just passing trade or is it Google?
So it is on Google. There is a website that came with it, which is definitely not the most modern looking website. And there is roadside signage. So it's always full, that facility, right? So that maybe tells you something about the pricing, but it's always full. It's been there for about 12 years. The signage is fine, the location is good, and the online presence, as I say, is weak, but it is there. So the opportunity for us was to turn all of that up and cross-sell our other site, which is less visible. So our previous site was not always 100% full. It was usually around about 90%. And there was always just a bit more vacancy than I wanted. When I say always, in the most recent like 2 or 3 years, there's been a bit more vacancy than I wanted. But by buying this other site, we've been able to cross-sell, and that facility is now full and has a little waiting list. So there was an additional benefit of taking on this property, you see, because we could cross-sell because we've got great signage. So although that site's 50 containers, not huge, it's allowed us to make sure we're selling everything else as well.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do with Beverly and Willoughby. We cross-sell. And so I always, if you look, so up to 10% of our move-ins for Willoughby actually come from Beverly, because Beverly's, it might be somewhere around about 92, 93% full most of the time. And then so certain size units we haven't got. So then we can just deflect them onto Willoughby. And that helps us with our, definitely with customers and coming in, and yeah, cross-selling definitely helps. So in terms of your facility now, then, in terms of your pricing structure, do you show your prices on the website?
We do on the new facility. We don't, interestingly, on our other, because what we've done, or I decided to do, was I haven't changed that website because although it wasn't that appealing, it wasn't broken. So I thought, let's just leave it and see, because we've had the facility since February. So what we're trying to do is just see where are all the inquiries coming from. is there something here we're missing? Because actually this website is, although it doesn't look great, maybe it's doing the goods. So we haven't really changed what that one's saying, and it does have the price on it, but our previous stock is listed on a different website, and we don't put the pricing on that one. Just trying to see what's, does one do better than the other?
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're going to pull those two together and brand it separately anyway. But that's the way it's set up at the moment.
Yeah, interesting though, because in terms of you saying about your website not looking particularly good, but it does its job. It's like when you test certain advertisements on Facebook, a lot of the time, the ugliest Facebook, pictures do better because it looks more organic, it looks more real.
Yes.
So just because it's not all singing, all dancing, all lovely and designed up to the ninth, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to do its job, because it's all about testing and seeing what converts better.
100%. Yeah.
So in terms of your pricing then, how much do you charge for a container currently? And how did you set your pricing? Is it set by the people around you, or is that price when you actually took over?
So when we took over, our containers have been let out at around about £70 a month.
Yeah.
And that's the original ones. And the new site we've bought is about £80 a month. There's VAT on top of that.
Yeah.
We generally do £90 a month. We have gone up to £100 a month, but that sometimes gives us higher churn. So we've settled around about £90 a month. Now, our main site, as in our first site, we've actually had all the containers rated separately. So the customers are responsible for the business rates.
Oh, okay.
Now, basically, it's a bit of a pain. It's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
But it has led to possibly more commercial customers. So it's one of the expenses we don't have to pay, whereas on the site we've just bought, that it already is part of the deal, so we haven't changed that. But basically, by charging the rates, by the customers picking up the rates, then it means that we can afford to charge less, if that makes sense.
No,
So
yeah, it does.
it's a bit controversial, because it means you're not just paying one fee and that's it. There's your container per week or per month. There is the added cost of dealing with business rates. But on saying that, probably about 85–90% of our customers then don't have to pay business rates because they qualify for small business rates relief. So that's possibly another reason why that site is a little bit more commercially orientated.
Do you know what, Jerry? This is exactly the reason why I love doing this podcast, because you learn so much from different people. And right now, I have 2 or 3 outdoor container owners that are contacting me saying the rates are going up. I can't believe it. What are you doing about the rates? What can we do? Is there anything we can do? Because obviously the rates, the clusters, because you can't move them, because you can move them, it's supposed to be cheaper. But people are saying now, because they've got people's goods in them, that they're rating them differently and higher. And so the outdoor container sites are really getting squashed or pressured with these new rates. However, other self-storage owners are saying, well, you should be, because then welcome to our world. And, that's the indoor versus the outdoor. And it's interesting now that you go down a completely different avenue and you get your customers to pay the rates and you get individual values for those containers. I've never heard of somebody doing that. So it's fantastic.
I think they're taking the piss as well, if you don't mind me saying, because they charge the rates they charge. Or they would like, the rateable value is basically based on what they think the rent is.
Yeah.
Now that's fine if it's office, but if it's a tin can, I'm not quite sure that the same works. But anyway, if we're charging, let's say £1,000 a year, just roughly, right? They're effectively saying the rateable value is £1,000. Therefore, if you're paying 49 pence in the pound or whatever it is, you're going to have to pay us £490 a year in rates.
Yeah.
But because of the current mechanisms, and I know England has the same, albeit slightly differently, you can claim small firms or small business rates relief or whatever it is. And so it does mean that certain customers have to pay it, right? But the majority of customers don't, and it's a bit of a filter as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, the site we've bought, the rateable value is much less as a site than it would be if they were all individually rated. I don't know why, that's just the way it is. So we're not tinkering with that one because the rateable value is not too bad. But the other ones, we have rated all the containers separately.
Interesting, yeah. And I'm very, very lucky as well because I've already mentioned on the podcast that because I sell packaging material, I'm classed as retail in both my facilities. And it meant before coronavirus, I was getting a fair off my rates anyway because it was helping a real push in, I don't know if it's nationwide or I think it is nationwide. It's a fair off rates. So I was happy with that. But obviously with coronavirus as well, it meant that I'm paying zero rates now. And I believe I can't remember exactly when it is, but it's for the next 3 months at least. And I don't know if it's been extended or not. So yeah, I do very, very well on that. And
works both ways, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a few people who have tried to get, since coronavirus obviously moved across to retail, but unfortunately they haven't been allowed. But for whatever reason, I've been very, very lucky that it's helped us out. So, what key performance indicators do you look at then, Jerry, for your storage to make sure that it's on the right direction and right track? Is it just revenue?
So it's occupancy, number one. Yeah. Revenue, yes. But occupancy really, because of the way my reports come through and because we've got a static number of containers, I go per site and the occupancy. That's really the main one. The other one is inquiry levels.
Yeah. And so most of your inquiries, and do you actually know where they come from? Is it Google or is it passing by or?
Yeah, they're all logged. I wouldn't be able to tell you the numbers right now, but yeah, they're all logged by our team. So it is a mix. There's no silver bullet there, of course. There's website, there's Google, there's signage, there's drive-bys, and there's current customers.
Yeah. And one last question on revenue for me then. I'm a massive, massive advocate of insurance. And a lot of people that I speak to on the podcast don't charge insurance for whatever reason. Do you charge insurance at your site?
No, but after our conversation the other day, I am investigating.
Yeah, I've just been going through the numbers as well. And at Beverly, we get 18% of our revenue from insurance, which is crazy. And as you know, it's 15% at Stormore. And I just believe that one, it's correctly insuring people's belongings if anything, God forbid, does happen, and so it's correct for the customer, and it obviously drives revenue for you, so it's correct for you as well. So yeah, I'm a massive advocate of that. So if people were looking in, so we have a lot of listeners who are thinking about getting in self-storage or want to get in self-storage, what advice would you say to them? Is it as good as you thought it might be, or is it better? What advice would you give to somebody looking?
I think it would be the same advice I would give to anybody just doing commercial property, which is, you need to get in the swim. You need to start having those conversations with the agents and listen to podcasts like this, of course, and
of course
start, personally, I would say start small, just because it allows you to learn cheaply. And, some of those mistakes that you might make, that I made, they're not as consequential because the gamble is less, if you understand what I mean. So just start with smaller chips. Start small and think big. So you're trying to develop your skills, and part of that first site is learning and education. So there'll be a cost to that. It's just trying to keep that cost down.
Yeah, what I'll also do, Jerry, I'll put a link to your mini series because I thought there was some really good advice, and it was something that I didn't do when I first set up as well. One of the standout key takeaways was you mentioned that just have enough containers for the demand you've currently got. So first of all, start with 2, then add another one when you need to. Add another one. But so many people do it the other way around. Like, first of all, when I first started Beverly, I bought 60 containers.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Why would I do that? I don't need to do that. And so probably for over a year, I'd paid for that asset. I'd paid for that container. And it wasn't generating any money because there wasn't demand there. And so what you said in your podcast was start small, start one at a time, and just wait for the demand. And when there's more demand, get more containers. And that's exactly what we're doing now at Stormore. We've got 24 containers, but we've only got 1 free at the minute because we only need 1 free. Yeah.
Scarcity. Yeah. Sorry, I should have said that. Yeah. I mean, scarcity is such a good seller. So if you have 100 containers on a site and the first customer rocks up, guess who's got the who's got the power in negotiation? It's not you, is it? Because you've got 100 boxes and one customer at the gate. Whereas if you've got 30 containers and 29 of them are let, or indeed they're all let, and the customer rocks up and you say, well, look, I'm going to get some containers in next week, your pricing is completely different. The
Yeah.
whole everything, the negotiation, everything's completely different.
Yeah, and so many people do it the other way around, where they just have, like, there's somebody in Beverly just starting up now, and they've had containers on that site now for 2 or 3 months, and they haven't opened. It still says coming soon.
Yeah.
And I just want to ring him up and say, buddy, just open the damn doors. Money coming in. You don't have to wait till the whole yard is full.
Doesn't have
before
to
you
be
open the
perfect.
doors.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jerry, just to finish off, firstly, thank you so much for coming on, buddy. I really, really enjoyed it. And I've got 5 questions, 1 sentence answers, 5 quick ones for fun. What's the best advice you have ever received?
Can I say 2 things?
Yeah, of course you can, Jerry.
Yeah. So I have a mentor not far from here. And one of the things he says to me, which I really like, he says, it doesn't have to be bonny. So what he's saying is, if you're buying a commercial building, don't be fixated on how beautiful it looks. You need to find something that works financially. Doesn't have to look bonny, which I think is really good. The other one, which
writing that down.
Yeah, the other one, which people will know, but it's so important. One of the phrases I use a lot is "start with the end in mind" from Stephen Covey. It's such an important thing, isn't it? Because otherwise you get distracted. You can't work out whether this opportunity in front of you is a distraction or an opportunity. Because if you don't know where you're trying to get to, or you're not focusing on where you're going, you can get distracted by all sorts of things, can't you? So starting with the end in mind is really good.
Yeah, I love that. And just going back to doesn't have to be Bonnie. One of my mentors, as you know, is Dan Bradbury, and he says I've got 2 facilities at the minute, and one's just an outdoor container site, and one's obviously a nice indoor facility that will rival the big yellows. It's got individual rooms alarmed, and it's got everything you possibly need in terms of technology. Yes, yeah. Exactly. And he's looking at the management accounts for both sites, and he said, Dean, am I fucking missing something here? What is wrong with you? Why do you want another outdoor facility when look at the return on investment here? And we only take £140,000 at Beverly, but we net over £100,000 at Beverly. Yeah. And then we look how much we take at Willoughby and look at what the return on investment is and how much we're netting, and it's nowhere near. But that goes nicely on to have the end in mind, because it's not just a cash flow. It's not just year on year. For me, it's about my exit as well. And I know full well that I am going to get a much higher multiple for that facility, Stormore, for the indoor one, than I am the outdoor one. But it's always nice to have that in mind as well. And I love it. Don't have to be Bonnie, because it doesn't. So for me, I've got to keep that in mind, but then I've also got to have that second one that you mentioned as well, and make sure that I've got the end in mind as well. And so 5 questions, really, really quick. Haven't started very well, have we?
Yeah, sorry.
5 minutes in. What's a daily habit that contributes to your success?
Getting up in the morning.
What time do you get up, Jerry?
Walking the dog helps.
Yeah.
So I got a dog about 2 years ago. Walking the dog gives me time to get my mind a bit clear and think about what I'm doing. And sometimes I'll listen to music, and then other times I'm like, no, I don't need to fill my head with that. I'm just going to have a think. So going out with the dog for 15, 20 minutes in the morning just helps you set yourself up for the day.
Yeah, I love that, because I go for a run as well, and I feel like that just helps me, just settles myself. I get to think, I get to be on my own, and prepares me for the day. So recommend one book.
So I'm quite a fan of Robert Kiyosaki, so Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but actually the book I would recommend in there is Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. It's actually fairly old now, but it's got a lot more of the detail in that one that the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book didn't have.
I've never read it.
You've never read it?
No. I've read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read that every year, but I haven't read that one.
Yeah, Rich Dad's Guide to Investing is really good, because it's not just about, right, how do I invest? it's actually about those different elements. Here we go. We'll give you another 5 minutes on this one. It's about actually investing in business, and not just the money, but the time, the effort, the systems, and all that stuff. It's a really good book. Really good book.
I will put a link to the show notes in that one. Yeah, I'll definitely read it. And what scares you, Jerry?
The kid's been cooped up for another 12 months in the house with me.
Yeah, I think every parent can relate to that one. And if I asked your 5 closest friends, what is Jerry's superpower, what would they say?
I think this is a difficult one to answer, right?
Yeah,
but
it's
I
horrible.
think probably, yeah, it's horrible. That's the right word. Probably about vision, or the ability to see how things could be.
Yeah.
And that's maybe to the built environment and properties and things. But I think that's probably the one. I always need somebody behind me tidying up, but it's maybe the ability to see how things could be. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm the same. I think I definitely need someone behind me tidying up, and luckily I've got a great team who do an awful lot of tidying, and my wife would say she tidies up a lot of my mess as well. So if people wanted to find out more about you, Jerry, where would they go?
So I'm in the usual places: LinkedIn, on Instagram, jerryalexander.commercial. And as you mentioned earlier on, this podcast is probably the best place. So the Commercial Property Investor Podcast.
Yeah,
good place.
I've got to say, I've really enjoyed that as well. I've really enjoyed listening to your podcast, and I think you're really, really honest, and you share a lot in your mini series about self-storage. I recommend that everybody listens to that as well, because it's obviously, if you listen to this, you're interested in self-storage, and so we'll put a link in the show notes as well.
Thanks, Dean.
To them exact episodes, because I just think there's a lot of value there as well. Okay, Jerry, well, thank you so much, buddy, for coming on. Really, really appreciate your time.
Loved it. It's been great fun. Thanks, Dean.